The next few weeks passed in a blur for Sophia. Each day seemed to bring something new, a fresh realization about herself, about the world, and about the things she had once taken for granted. She had begun to spend more time with Mary, not just in the house but also outside, joining her on errands and small tasks. The more time she spent with Mary, the more she realized just how much she had missed by living in her own little world. One of the first things Sophia learned from Mary was the importance of hard work. In the mansion, everything had always been done for her. Her clothes were picked out, her meals were prepared, and her schedule was laid out by her father's staff. There had been no room for her to struggle, no space for her to fail. But with Mary, every task was an opportunity to challenge herself, to step outside her comfort zone and to see what she was really capable of. At first, the tasks were small, helping Mary carry groceries, sweeping the floors, and washing the dishes. It didn't seem like much, but Sophia found it difficult. The work was tiring. Her hands ached from the scrubbing, and her muscles, which had always been soft from a life of comfort, were sore. It was humbling. She had never felt so physically exhausted in her life. One day, Mary asked Sophia if she would help her clean the garden. It wasn't something Sophia had ever done before, and at first she hesitated. She thought of all the other things she could be doing, how easy it would be to call one of the other staff members to do it, but something inside her stirred. She had been watching Mary take on every task with a sense of pride and determination. She didn't want to be someone who only existed in the background. She wanted to learn what it meant to work hard, to earn something through her own effort. So, Sophia agreed. They spent hours working together in the garden. The sun was hot, and the ground was dry and hard. Sophia's hands were covered in dirt, and her clothes became soaked with sweat. But as they worked, she found herself feeling more alive than she had in a long time. She could feel the strength in her body growing, her confidence building with every shovel of dirt she moved, every weed she pulled out. As they worked, Mary shared more about her life. She spoke of the long hours she had worked in factories, the struggles of raising her children alone, and the sacrifices she had made to provide them with a better future. Mary had never given up, no matter how tough life got. Even when things seemed impossible, she kept moving forward. Her words stuck with Sophia, and she found herself thinking about them long after the day was over. That evening, after they finished, in the garden, Mary invited Sophia to sit with her in the small courtyard outside the house. They both wiped the sweat from their foreheads and took a deep breath, enjoying the coolness of the evening air. The work had been hard, but it felt good. For the first time, Sophia understood what it meant to earn something with her own hands. "Sophia," Mary said softly, "I know your life has been different from mine. You've never had to work like this, and I know it's hard. But you have something special in you. I can see it. You're stronger than you think." Sophia looked at Mary, her eyes filled with gratitude. She had never heard anyone speak to her like that before. It wasn't just about the work they had done together. It was about the way Mary had seen her. Mary didn't see Sophia as just the daughter of a billionaire. She saw her as someone who could be more, someone who could rise above the luxury of her life and find meaning in the simplest things. The next day, Sophia woke up early. She had always been a late riser, used to the leisurely mornings that came with her life of privilege. But today felt different. She wanted to do something. She didn't want to waste another day floating through life. She wanted to prove to herself that she could be more than just the sheltered girl who had never worked for anything. She went down to the kitchen and found Mary preparing breakfast. Without thinking, she picked up a cloth and started to help clean the countertops. Mary looked up, surprised but pleased. "You're up early today," she said with a smile. Sophia smiled back. "I wanted to get started on the day." As the day went on, Sophia found herself more and more involved in the tasks around the house. She helped Mary with the laundry, arranged flowers in the dining room, and even tried her hand at cooking. Every task, no matter how small, made her feel more connected to the world outside her usual bubble of luxury. She began to see things differently, realizing how much effort went into maintaining the life she had always taken for granted. But it wasn't just about the work. It was about the people who worked alongside her. Mary's strength wasn't just in her ability to carry heavy loads or clean the house. It was in her ability to find joy in every task, to bring warmth and kindness to everything she did. Sophia began to see that Mary wasn't just doing these things out of necessity. She was doing them because they gave her purpose. She had a life that was filled with meaning, even if that meaning came from the simplest acts of care and hard work. Sophia couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. Mary had built a life from scratch, one filled with challenges, but also filled with love and resilience. Sophia had been given everything, yet she felt as though she had nothing. She realized how empty her life had been until now, how little she had truly lived. One day, after a long morning of cleaning and organizing the library, Sophia sat down to rest. She had worked harder than she had ever worked before, and though her body was tired, her mind was clearer than ever. She thought about Mary's words, about how she had seen something in Sophia that no one else had. Mary believed in her, and that belief made Sophia believe in herself too. From that moment on, everything changed. Sophia no longer saw herself as the helpless, pampered daughter of a billionaire. She began to see herself as someone who could make a difference, someone who could work hard and build a life of her own. It wasn't going to be easy, and it wasn't going to happen overnight. But for the first time, Sophia understood that the real strength came from within. She didn't need her father's wealth or status to define her. She could define herself. The more she worked with Mary, the more she realized that strength wasn't about power or money. It was about the ability to face life's challenges with grace and dignity, to keep going when things got tough. Mary had shown Sophia that there was so much more to life than just existing in comfort. There was a world out there full of opportunities, to grow, to learn, and to make a real impact. And with that realization, Sophia knew she was ready to take the next step. She was ready to leave behind the world of privilege and live a life of purpose, a life that was truly her own. It was time for her to discover her own strength and to use it to create something meaningful, something that would last far beyond the walls of her father's mansion. The days following that realization felt like a new beginning for Sophia. She no longer felt like a spectator in her own life, standing on the sidelines as the world passed her by. Something had shifted inside her, an inner strength that she had never known was there. She found herself waking up earlier, ready to take on the day. It wasn't just about the work. It was about the person she was becoming. Sophia's mornings were different now. No longer did she stay in bed, waiting for the day to unfold for her. She was the one who made it happen. She would start her day by making her own breakfast, something simple but meaningful. She enjoyed it, the small act of preparing something for herself. It was a far cry from the elaborate meals she used to have prepared by a private chef, but it felt good. It felt like freedom. Mary, as always, was there to guide her. The older woman never pushed, never made Sophia feel like she was doing something wrong, even when her attempts at cooking were far from perfect. Mary's encouragement was quiet, but firm. "You'll get it," she would say with a smile. "Don't worry, it takes time." Sophia learned to be patient with herself, something that had always been difficult for her. In her past life, everything came easily, and if something didn't go right, she simply moved on to something else. But now, with every task she took on, she learned to face the challenge head on. It wasn't always easy and she didn't always succeed, but the effort itself felt valuable. It was her effort. She was learning to do things for herself, to prove to herself that she was capable, even when the results weren't perfect. The more Sophia worked with Mary, the more she appreciated the small things in life. Before, she had been surrounded by grand gestures, expensive gifts, lavish parties, and luxury vacations. Those things had always seemed like the measure of success. But now Sophia realized that true fulfillment came from the quiet moments, the act of planting flowers in the garden, the feeling of accomplishing a task with your own hands, the satisfaction of working toward something meaningful. Those moments, no matter how small, were what truly made life worth living. One afternoon, as they worked in the garden, Mary began to tell Sophia more about her own struggles. She talked about how she had come to this country with nothing but hope in her heart, working multiple jobs just to make ends meet. She had faced hardships that Sophia could never imagine. Yet through it all, Mary had never given up. She had always kept going, always found a way to make things work, even when the odds were stacked against her. "Life isn't easy," Mary said, her voice steady as she pruned the bushes. "But you can't give up. You have to keep pushing forward, even when it feels like the world is against you. If you do that, you'll find that you're stronger than you ever thought." Sophia listened, her heart heavy with the weight of Mary's words. She had lived a life of comfort, never knowing the struggles Mary had faced. But now, as she listened to Mary's story, she felt a deep sense of respect for her. She admired Mary's strength, her resilience, and her ability to keep going no matter what. That night, as Sophia sat in her room, she thought about the journey she had been on. It hadn't been long, but it felt like a lifetime. She had started as someone who never had to lift a finger, someone who had no real purpose other than enjoying the wealth her family had built. But now, she was different. She was stronger, more confident, and more aware of the world around her. Sophia realized that it wasn't enough to just work hard. She needed to work toward something. She needed to find a purpose that would guide her, something that would give her life meaning beyond the walls of her father's mansion. She thought about Mary's words, about how life was about pushing forward even when things were tough. In the days that followed, Sophia began to take small steps toward a new goal. She started reading books about topics that had always intrigued her: social issues, sustainability, and ways to help those in need. She began to think about how she could use her privilege to make a real difference in the world. It was a far cry from the life she had once known, but it felt right. For the first time, she was thinking beyond herself. She wanted to contribute, to help those who, like Mary, had worked hard their entire lives without the luxury of choice. One day, as she sat with her father in the grand dining room, she found herself telling him about her plans. She had never spoken to him like this before. The conversation was different from all the others they had had over the years, which usually revolved around business or social gatherings. This time, Sophia spoke from the heart. "I've been thinking a lot lately, Dad," she said, her voice steady but unsure. "I want to do something more, something that matters. I want to find a way to use what we have to help others." Her father looked at her, surprised by the seriousness in her tone. He had always been proud of Sophia's beauty, her social graces, and the way she handled herself in public. But he had never heard her speak about anything so deeply personal before. "Sophia," he said slowly, "you know we have everything we need. There's no reason to worry about the future. Why change things now?" But Sophia wasn't deterred. "Because I don't want to just exist, Dad. I want to create something that can help people. I want to make a difference in the world, not just enjoy the luxury of it. I know I've been given so much, but I want to do something with it." Her father remained silent for a moment, his eyes thoughtful. He was a businessman, practical and driven by success. But as he looked at his daughter, he saw something he hadn't seen before: determination. He saw that she had changed, that she was no longer the sheltered young woman who lived in a world of comfort. She was someone who had found her own strength, someone who wanted to do more than just enjoy the life she had been given. "I understand," he said finally, his voice softer than usual. "I never thought about it that way, but if this is something you truly want to do, I'll support you." Sophia smiled, a feeling of relief washing over her. For the first time, she felt like she was standing on her own 2 feet. She wasn't just the daughter of a billionaire anymore. She was someone who had a vision, someone who wanted to make her mark on the world. From that moment on, things began to shift for Sophia. She started planning, researching, and finding ways to use her family's wealth and influence to help others. She volunteered at local shelters, donated to causes she believed in, and began to work on projects that would make a real impact in the community. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't always glamorous, but she was willing to put in the work. As she worked side by side with Mary, Sophia knew that she had found her path. She wasn't just learning how to work hard, she was learning how to work for something bigger than herself. And with every small step, she was becoming more and more the person she had always wanted to be. Strong, purposeful, and ready to face whatever challenges came her way. Sophia woke up early that morning with a sense of anticipation she hadn't felt in a long time. The sun had just begun to peek through the curtains, casting soft light across her room. But unlike before, when she would lie in bed and let the day slip away, today was different. Today she was ready. She felt a deep sense of purpose bubbling inside her, the kind of purpose she had been searching for all her life. She was no longer just the daughter of a billionaire. She was a person, with her own dreams and goals. She had spent the past few weeks planning, reading, and learning. She had been inspired by her conversations with Mary, who had shown her the true meaning of resilience and hard work. Now, it was time to take the first real step toward turning her ideas into action. Today was the day she would start her new project, one that would give her life the meaning she had been longing for. Sophia had always been aware of the disparity between her life and that of people like Mary. The contrast between the luxury of her mansion and the struggles of people working hard every day to make a living had never been so clear. For the first time, Sophia didn't want to live in a bubble of comfort. She wanted to use her resources to help others, to make a real difference. She wanted to find ways to support communities that lacked access to the things she had always taken for granted. Basic needs like food, healthcare, and education. Her first step was to approach a local nonprofit organization that focused on helping immigrant families, just like Mary's. She had heard about them from one of the staff members who had worked with Mary. They were looking for volunteers, and Sophia thought it would be a good place to start. She could see how much she could learn from people who were working tirelessly to make a change, and she felt that by contributing in small ways, she could gain insight into the real challenges people faced. When Sophia walked into the nonprofit office, she was greeted with warm smiles and a sense of community that was so different from the cold, distant world of high society she was used to. People here weren't concerned with status or appearances. They were focused on helping each other, lifting each other up. Sophia felt a wave of emotion wash over her as she realized how much she had to learn from these people. She sat down with the program director, a woman named Maria, who had been working with the organization for over 10 years. Maria explained how the nonprofit provided food, shelter, job training, and educational resources to families who were struggling to make ends meet. She spoke passionately about her work, and Sophia couldn't help but be moved by her words. Maria didn't have the wealth or the connections that Sophia had, but she had something far more valuable: the ability to make a difference. Sophia knew that she had to find a way to contribute, even if it was in small ways at first. Maria suggested that Sophia help with fundraising efforts, using her connections to raise money for the organization. At first, the idea felt a little out of her comfort zone. She wasn't used to asking people for money, especially people who might not see the value in supporting causes like these. But as Maria spoke about the lives they were changing, Sophia felt a sense of responsibility. She had been given so much, and it was time to share it with others. Over the next few weeks, Sophia threw herself into her new role. She reached out to her father's business contacts, organized events, and did everything she could to bring attention to the nonprofit's cause. Slowly but surely, the donations started to come in. It wasn't easy, and there were times when Sophia felt discouraged. Some people were skeptical and others were indifferent. But she remembered Mary's words, the way she had never given up no matter how tough things got. Sophia kept going, and eventually, her efforts began to pay off. She raised enough money to help provide food and clothing to several families in need, and the nonprofit was able to offer job training programs that helped people find stable employment. Sophia saw firsthand the difference that even a small contribution could make. She was no longer just a bystander in her own life. She was part of something bigger, something meaningful. As Sophia continued to work with the nonprofit, she found herself growing in ways she had never imagined. She started to look at the world differently. The things that had once seemed so important, designer clothes, lavish vacations, and parties, now felt empty to her. She had discovered that true fulfillment came not from what she had, but from what she could give to others. One afternoon, after a long day of organizing another fundraising event, Sophia met Mary in the garden. They sat down on the bench, both of them tired but content. Sophia felt a deep sense of gratitude for the woman who had shown her the way. "You've come a long way, Miss Sophia," Mary said, her voice warm with pride. Sophia smiled, feeling a lump in her throat. "I've learned more from you than I ever thought possible," she said. "I used to think that money and status were the most important things, but now I know it's about what you do with what you have, not just what you have." Mary nodded, her eyes soft. "You have a good heart, Sophia. That's what matters most." Sophia felt a deep sense of peace in that moment. She had found her purpose, and it wasn't in the things she had or the life she had been born into. It was in the way she could make a difference in the world, even if it was in small ways. She realized that the most important thing was not how much you owned, but how much you gave. The following months were filled with growth and new opportunities. Sophia continued to work with the nonprofit, and her efforts to help others became more focused and determined. She found that the more she gave, the more she received in return. The sense of fulfillment that came from helping others was far greater than anything her wealth had ever provided. Sophia's transformation was evident to everyone around her. Her father noticed the change in her and began to take her seriously when it came to matters of philanthropy. He had always been proud of her for her beauty and grace, but now he saw her as someone who could make a real impact. He even offered to match some of the donations she had raised, further expanding the nonprofit's reach. But for Sophia, it wasn't about the recognition or the praise. It was about the satisfaction of knowing that she was making a difference. She had learned that life wasn't about comfort or luxury, it was about purpose. She had found her own strength, and it was a strength that came not from wealth, but from the ability to help others to rise above her own circumstances and make the world a better place. As the years passed, Sophia continued to build on the foundation she had created. She started new projects, launched initiatives to support education, and advocated for those who had no voice. She became a force for change, not just in her community, but in the world. And through it all, she never forgot Mary, the woman who had shown her the true meaning of strength. It was Mary who had inspired her to step outside her comfort zone, to stop waiting for life to happen, and to start making a difference. In the end, Sophia realized that the most powerful thing she could do was live her life with purpose, to find meaning in the work she did and to share that meaning with others. And in doing so, she had become the person she had always hoped to be, strong, compassionate, and ready to make her mark on the world. The mansion was large, luxurious, and filled with every possible comfort. From the marble floors to the towering windows that overlooked sprawling gardens, it was a place that spoke of wealth and power. It was a home that didn't just belong to any family, but to a family with wealth so vast it seemed endless. The daughter of the house, Sophia, had grown up here. This was her world, one of opulence and privilege. But despite all the riches surrounding her, something always felt missing. Sophia had everything she could ever dream of: designer clothes, the latest gadgets, and endless vacations to exotic places. Her friends admired her for all that she had, but Sophia had never truly understood the meaning of these things. They didn't feel real to her. They didn't feel earned. Her father, a self-made billionaire, had created this empire from the ground up, but she had never known the struggles that came with that. To her, the mansion was just a big, empty house filled with expensive things, not a symbol of hard work and sacrifice. Sophia's days were often spent inside the mansion, away from the outside world. She would wake up late, have breakfast prepared by the chefs, and then spend the day in front of her laptop, scrolling through social media or watching movies. There was no real purpose to her life. Everything came easy, and she never had to work for anything. Most of her peers were busy with school, internships, or starting their own businesses, but not Sophia. She never had to prove herself. She had been born into this world and she was content with that, or at least she thought she was. But then things began to change. It wasn't a big event or an enormous shift. It was small, almost unnoticeable at first. It started with a new face in the house. Mary, a woman hired as a maid. Mary was older than the other staff members. She was in her 40s, with kind eyes and a quiet strength. She wasn't glamorous, nor did she try to be. She came from a humble background, and her clothes, though clean, were simple. She had the look of someone who had worked hard all her life and knew how to take on any challenge. Mary had been hired to help around the house, cleaning, cooking, and maintaining the large mansion. At first, Sophia hardly noticed her. The staff were just part of the furniture, people who came and went without leaving much of an impression. But as the days passed, Sophia couldn't help but observe Mary. She would catch glimpses of her as she moved through the house, working with a calm determination. It wasn't the way the other staff worked. The other maids and butlers seemed to float through their tasks almost like they were on autopilot. They did their jobs, and that was that. But Mary? She was different. She approached her work with purpose. Whether she was scrubbing the floors, carrying laundry, or preparing a meal, Mary did it with a focus and energy that Sophia couldn't ignore. One afternoon, Sophia was in her room when she heard a strange noise outside. She looked out of her window and saw Mary standing beside a large cart, one that was loaded with heavy furniture. The cart seemed too big for a person to move alone, and the furniture looked like it weighed a ton. But Mary wasn't hesitating. With a grunt, she began to push the cart across the yard, her muscles straining with the effort. Sophia stared in disbelief. She had never seen anyone, especially someone like Mary, work so hard. Her father had a team of people who moved furniture and heavy items all the time, but they used special equipment or, if it was too much, a second person. Yet here was Mary, a single woman, lifting and pushing the heavy cart all on her own. She made it look effortless, like it was just another part of her routine. The more Sophia watched, the more she was impressed. It wasn't just the physical strength that amazed her. It was the confidence with which Mary did it. She didn't question her ability, she simply did it. For the first time in her life, Sophia felt a pang of guilt. Here she was, living in this enormous house, doing nothing of value, and there was Mary, working harder than anyone else with so much strength and resilience. Mary's life was full of struggles. She had worked her whole life just to survive, just to make sure her children had food and shelter. But despite all that, she carried herself with a quiet dignity. Sophia couldn't understand it. Why was Mary so strong? Why didn't she complain? Why didn't she ever seem to tire, even after the most difficult tasks? And more importantly, why did Sophia, who had so much, feel so empty? As the days went on, Sophia began to watch Mary more closely. She would find herself observing the older woman while Mary worked, admiring how she moved through the house with purpose and grace. It wasn't just her strength that intrigued Sophia, but her attitude. Mary never seemed to ask for anything. She did her work quietly, always with a smile, even if it was small. There was no bitterness in her, no envy. She had nothing but her work, yet she gave it everything she had. One day, Sophia found herself in the kitchen, sitting at the counter, staring out the window. She didn't know why, but she was thinking about Mary. Her strength, her quiet determination, something about it just didn't sit right with Sophia. Why did Mary have to work so hard? Why didn't she get a break? Why was she always so kind, so patient when life seemed so unfair? It was at that moment that Sophia realized something. She had never really worked for anything in her life. Everything had been handed to her, given to her by her father's wealth and status. She had been born into a world where she didn't have to try. But watching Mary made Sophia question herself. What did she have to show for her life? Was she just going to sit in this mansion living in luxury while people like Mary did all the hard work? That day, Sophia decided to take a small step outside of her world. It was a tiny thing, but it was the beginning. She walked over to Mary, who was cleaning the dining room, and asked if she could help. Mary looked at her, a little surprised, but she smiled warmly and handed her a cloth. They began to work side by side in silence. In that moment, Sophia realized something important. She wasn't as helpless as she had thought. She could do more than just sit back and watch. There was strength inside her, even if she hadn't discovered it yet. And maybe, just maybe there, was a way for her to change the direction of her life. That was the first step. It was small, almost insignificant, but it was enough to spark something inside her. The journey ahead would be long and difficult, but Sophia was beginning to understand that true strength wasn't just about wealth or power. It was about perseverance, resilience, and the will to keep going, no matter what. This part sets up the contrast between Sophia's privileged life and Mary's hard-earned strength. It introduces the beginning of Sophia's transformation as she becomes more aware of the challenges and resilience of those around her. Over the next few days, Sophia couldn't stop thinking about Mary. She found herself watching the older woman more often, not just because of the way she worked, but because of how she carried herself. Mary's strength wasn't just physical, it was emotional too. The more Sophia observed, the more she realized that Mary didn't just work hard for the sake of it. There was a purpose behind everything she did. Mary had a story, a journey that shaped her into the person she was, and that intrigued Sophia. She felt a strange pull toward her, as though she needed to learn something from Mary. Sophia had grown up with everything handed to her. She had never really known what it was like to struggle or to fight for something. Her life had always been filled with ease and comfort. But now, watching Mary's quiet strength, something inside Sophia began to stir. She realized how little she knew about the world beyond her mansion, about the real challenges that people faced every day just to survive. One afternoon, as the sun began to set, Sophia found herself standing in the doorway of the kitchen. She had been watching Mary prepare dinner, chopping vegetables with a precision that seemed to come from years of experience. Mary didn't even look up as she worked. She was lost in her task, her hands moving fluidly and confidently. Sophia hesitated for a moment before stepping into the room. "Mary," she said softly, her voice unsure. "Can I help with something?" Mary paused for a brief moment, then smiled, nodding. "Of course, Miss Sophia. You can chop the carrots if you like. They're ready." Sophia took the knife from Mary's outstretched hand, feeling the cool handle against her palm. She looked down at the carrots, wondering how she could mess this up. She had never done anything like this before, but there was something about Mary's calm and encouraging presence that made her feel like it was okay to try. As she began to chop the carrots, she was surprised at how hard it was. The knife didn't slide through as easily as she expected, and she found herself struggling to make even slices. Her hands weren't used to this kind of work. The frustration bubbled up inside her, but she remembered Mary's quiet strength, how she had never seemed frustrated even when the tasks were difficult. Sophia pushed through, determined to keep going, even though each slice felt awkward and imperfect. Mary watched her from across the room, her eyes kind but knowing. "Don't worry, Miss Sophia," she said gently. "It takes time. We all start somewhere." Sophia nodded, her face flushing with embarrassment. She could feel the weight of her own privilege in that moment. She had always been able to rely on others to do the hard work for her, but now she was seeing firsthand how much effort went into even the smallest tasks. Mary didn't have the luxury of hiring others to help her. She did everything herself, and she did it with grace and strength. As the evening went on, Sophia found herself talking more with Mary. They talked about the food they were preparing, about the weather, and about little things that didn't seem important but somehow made the conversation feel warm and genuine. Mary shared small details of her life, telling Sophia about her children and the challenges she faced as an immigrant trying to make a better life for them. Mary had worked multiple jobs over the years, often struggling to make ends meet, but she never let it show. She was always smiling, always patient, always giving her best. Sophia listened intently, fascinated by Mary's stories. There was something powerful in her words, something that made Sophia realize how little she knew about life beyond her own small bubble. Mary had worked hard her entire life, not for the luxuries that Sophia took for granted, but simply to survive, to provide for her family. Sophia began to understand the depth of Mary's resilience. That night, as Sophia lay in bed, She thought about everything she had learned from Mary. She had always believed that strength came from money or status, from the things people could buy or achieve. But now she saw that true strength came from something much deeper. The ability to persevere through hardships, to keep going even when life seemed unfair. Mary wasn't just strong because of her work ethic. She was strong because of the way she faced every challenge with dignity and courage. Sophia felt a shift inside her. She couldn't keep living her life the way she had been. She couldn't keep hiding behind her wealth and privilege. She had seen what real strength looked like, and she wanted to be like that. She wanted to find her own purpose, her own strength. She wanted to be someone who could face the world with the same resilience that Mary did. The next day, as soon as she woke up, Sophia decided to take action. She had no idea where this would lead, but she knew she had to start somewhere. She asked Mary if she could join her on a small errand that she had planned, something that would take them outside of the mansion, into the city. Mary was a little surprised, but agreed, smiling warmly as she handed Sophia her coat. The drive to the city felt different from anything Sophia had ever experienced. She had been to the city countless times before, but always in the back of a luxury car, surrounded by wealth. This time she was with Mary, sitting in the front seat, feeling the hum of the car against the pavement. They talked as they drove, and Sophia found herself learning more about Mary's life, about the small struggles that made each day feel like a victory. When they arrived at a small market, Mary led Sophia through the aisles, picking out fresh produce and other necessities. It was a far cry from the glamorous shopping trips Sophia was used to, but something about it felt real. The simple act of choosing vegetables and paying for them with the money Mary had earned made Sophia feel connected to something she had never experienced before. As they finished their errand and headed back to the car, Sophia felt a sense of accomplishment. It wasn't much, but it was a start. For the first time in her life, she was doing something for herself, something that wasn't tied to her family's wealth. It felt empowering, and she knew it was only the beginning. Mary's quiet strength had shown Sophia that there was more to life than what she had known. She had learned that resilience wasn't about how much money you had, or what you could buy. It was about the strength to keep going no matter what, and that was something Sophia wanted to learn, something she wanted to build within herself. As they drove back to the mansion, Sophia couldn't help but smile. She was beginning to understand what Mary had known all along. Strength didn't come from what you owned, but from what you could overcome. And for the first time in her life, Sophia felt like she was starting to discover her own strength.